Welcome to our first look at claims made in the book, Revelation, Its Grand Climax at Hand, published by Jehovah's Witnesses. In this series, we'll be examining selected passages from the book and comparing them to what biblical scholars have learned about Revelation, especially its historical and literary context. Today, we're starting with Chapter 1, paragraphs 3 and 4, where a crucial difference emerges. Jehovah's Witnesses treat Revelation as divinely inspired prophecy, pointing to specific modern events. Scholars, however, understand it, first and foremost, as a work of apocalyptic literature.
Is not Revelation also called Apocalypse? That is so, Revelation being the English translation of apocalypsis in the Greek text. Many people equate apocalypse with world destruction by nuclear warfare. In a Texas, USA city where great numbers of nuclear warheads were made, religiously inclined people used to say, "We'll be the first to go." Clergymen in that area were reported to have been convinced that Armageddon is not only inevitable, but also close at hand, and that the final battle between the forces of good and bad, of God and Satan, will take place as a nuclear holocaust. But what really is an apocalypse? Though dictionaries define it by using terms such as an imminent cosmic cataclysm, the Greek apocalypsis basically means unveiling or uncovering. Thus, the last book of the Bible is properly entitled a revelation. Here we find not a mere fatalistic message of world doom, but an uncovering of divine truths that should build in our hearts a radiant hope and an immovable faith.
The term apocalypse indeed means revelation or unveiling, not destruction. However, when scholars are talking about ancient texts, an apocalypse is also a literary genre. An apocalypse does not necessarily have to be eschatological, that is, concerned with end times. There are many examples of apocalyptic literature. 1st Enoch, Daniel, 4th Ezra, which is incorporated into 2nd Esdras, 2nd Baruch, the Apocalypse of Paul, and so on. Many scholars describe Jesus as an apocalyptic preacher. In the Gospels, you find a mini-apocalypse, where the disciples ask Jesus what the sign of the end will be, and he goes on to make predictions. The apocalypticism of Jesus is primarily eschatological. One of the most respected scholars on the subject, Dr. John J. Collins, defines an apocalypse as a genre of revelatory literature with a narrative framework in which a revelation is mediated by an otherworldly being to a human recipient, disclosing a transcendent reality, both temporal, in that it envisages eschatological salvation, and spatial, insofar as it involves another supernatural world. This definition helps us recognize that Revelation isn't a secret code for modern-day events. It's a symbolic narrative, shaped by its own time and place, using vivid imagery to convey hope and cosmic justice amid oppression. Scholars have often thought that apocalyptic literature, such as Revelation, comes out of times when the people were being oppressed, and that one of the functions of the genre is to show that the awfulness of the world can be overcome by God and provide comfort and hope of something better to come. By ignoring the literary genre, Jehovah's Witnesses strip the text of its original context. Instead of seeing Revelation as a first-century message of hope for persecuted Christians under Roman rule, they reframe it as a predictive timeline that culminates in their own modern-day movement. The beasts, trumpets, and plagues become symbols for things like the United Nations or the rise of Jehovah's Witnesses as God's chosen people. But without grounding the interpretation in the genre, these connections become arbitrary and often reflect the beliefs of the interpreters more than the intentions of the author. In his 2023 book, Armageddon, Dr. Bart D. Ehrman writes that after many years of teaching Revelation as a book of hope, he has come to see it as deeply violent and vengeful. He observes that Revelation was not especially popular among early Christians. It was rarely copied. Many church fathers were skeptical of it, and it struggled to gain widespread canonical acceptance. Martin Luther, for example, once said Revelation is neither apostolic nor prophetic, and doubted it was inspired by the Holy Spirit. This challenges the idea, promoted in J.W. publications, that Revelation was always central to Christian belief. In fact, early Christians struggled with it, precisely because it is so strange, violent, and open to conflicting interpretations. Revelation only really became influential after it was canonized especially from the 4th century onward. Revelation wasn't always the last book of the Bible. It was never intended to be the last book of anything. It was written as a single scroll to be read on its own. All the books of the Bible started out that way. Sure, apocalyptic literature can bring believers hope and comfort in a way, as they will always see themselves in the position of the righteous. However, it is often depicting violent scenes and calamity for non-believers, and so it gets used as a weapon against people who don't believe, or who believe but have a slightly different interpretation. By overlooking the genre of apocalyptic literature, Jehovah's Witnesses miss Revelation's original voice. The book is most likely not a divine code book revealing the timing of Armageddon or the identity of God's modern organization. It's a symbolic text, written by Jewish Christians during a time of imperial violence, from an oppressor that they looked forward to defeating. Ignoring genre leads to an interpretation that is not only historically inaccurate, but potentially harmful, turning a book of hope into a tool of fear, exclusion, and religious control. Next time, we'll look at the plausibility that the Apostle John authored Revelation. Don't forget to check out the other resources in the description.